Did your parents ever blame you when it was their fault? My parents were, well, they were together. That's about the nicest thing I can say. Growing up, it was clear they were more like roommates who occasionally argued than an actual couple. Dad was always working, Mom was always volunteering and redecorating. They existed in the same house, but they didn't really connect. Anyway, I was around 16 when things started to get really bad. The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Whispered arguments, slammed doors, the whole 9 yards. I tried to stay out of it, focusing on school and my part-time job, but it was impossible to ignore. Then one night, after a particularly nasty fight, my mom sat me down. I figured it was going to be the usual "your father doesn't understand me" spiel, but it was different. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You know, if you weren't around, maybe your father and I would still be happy." It felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't say anything, just stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. She went on, talking about how much strain I put on the relationship, how all the sacrifices they made for me had ultimately driven them apart, how I was the reason they couldn't pursue their own dreams. I remember thinking back to all the times they missed events for me or didn't help me and feeling confused. It was like I was being blamed for existing, for being born. It felt like she always needed to be the protagonist and twisted the narrative to fit her needs. That night was the beginning of the end. My parents' relationship continued to deteriorate and the blame game intensified. I became the scapegoat for everything that went wrong in their lives. Bad day at work? It was because I was a stressful teenager. Car broke down? It was because they had to drive me everywhere. Didn't make a sale at the open house they were hosting. Clearly it was because the music I was playing in my room was disrupting the peace. The worst part was that I started to believe them. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I'd been a better kid, they wouldn't be so miserable. It messed with my head for years. I remember speaking to my guidance counselor in high school, and she was already telling others that I was a lost cause. My parents eventually divorced when I was 18, and honestly, it was a relief. But the damage was done. It took a lot of therapy and some good friends to realize that their failing marriage wasn't my fault. I was just a kid. They were the adults, and they were responsible for their own choices and their own happiness. It wasn't until I had my own children that I truly understood how messed up it was for my parents to put that kind of burden on me.